So much for joining us for 12 News at 10. I'm Kayleigh Divine. 1 year after Kayleigh's law took effect in Arizona, the law's namesake is reflecting on its impact. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for 12 News at 10. I'm Kayleigh Divine. Mark Curtis is on assignment. Kayleigh's law allows for victims of dangerous crimes to have protection from their abusers for life, something that wasn't even an option until a year ago. 12 News journalist Bianca Bono caught up with Kayleigh Kozak and joins us live in studio. Bianca.
Karibe, we've obtained court data and are taking a closer look at just how many victims of dangerous crimes have been able to get protection for life.
It's very surreal.
When Kayleigh Kozak began advocating for a new state law, it was impossible to know how many people it would help. Today, 1 year after Kayleigh's law took effect, she's getting her first glimpse.
In 1 year, 1,009 victims in the state of Arizona have been able to serve their perpetrator with an injunction that is valid for their natural lifetime.
When Kozak was in middle school, she was sexually abused by her soccer coach. He was convicted and given lifetime probation. But in 2020, she got a call that he was petitioning to have his probation lifted.
Why should the person who sexually abused me when I was a child ever be able to have the opportunity to contact me with no repercussion? My parents were told he would be on probation for life.
As a victim and survivor of abuse, Kozak was left with little to no options, so she spoke out about it, ultimately partnering with Senator Sina Kerr to draft Kayleigh's law, allowing victims of dangerous crimes to obtain a lifetime restraining order against their perpetrator. It passed with bipartisan support, and 1 year after it took effect, in Maricopa County alone, 868 lifetime injunctions were issued during sentencing, and an additional 62 victims sought retroactive injunctions.
There are many loopholes in the system, and it is very, very broken.
Arizona was the first state in the nation to pass a law of this kind. Wisconsin followed shortly after, and Kozak is now working with close to a dozen others to draft similar legislation with the goal of bringing Kayleigh's law to every state, turning her personal pain into progress.
To know that 2 states now offer this protection is great, but victims and survivors, they don't just matter in 2 states, they matter in every state.
And in a statement, the bill's sponsor, Senator Kerr, said in part, Kayleigh's law has provided more than 1,000 victims of sexual assault and other atrocities added protections from their abusers. I'm proud of being a small part in crafting this legislation. Bianca Bono, 12 News.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. And today we're going to discuss something really serious, and I have a really special guest. Imagine the worst thing that I think a woman, a parent could ever imagine, and that is being a victim of abuse. And then imagine this is happening to a child or to your child. And then being told that the protection that would keep the abuser away, the abuser that harmed you or your child, could be canceled at any time. That you'd have to go to court and face this predator again, just to get back your peace of mind, just to get back your safety. My guest today didn't just survive that, she changed the law. This is the story behind Kayleigh's Law. And so I'm really proud to bring Kayleigh on stage. Hi, Kayleigh. Kayleigh Kozak. I'm so glad that you could be here today. Why don't you first tell everyone your story?
Thank you so much for having me on. And unfortunately, my story is so relatable for so many others who've experienced what I have endured and am still enduring. And that is that I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I was sexually abused in 6th and 7th grade by my PE teacher on school grounds, who was also my club soccer coach. And I found the strength and courage to turn him in when I was a freshman, when I was just 14 years old, and was told when he was convicted and sentenced that in lieu of extended prison time, which he was facing 25 years to life in prison, that he would receive a lesser jail sentence, which was 9 months, and 2 terms of lifetime probation in lieu of prison time. So my parents had trusted that that was the reality, only to be blindsided in 2020 and find out that that was in fact not what actually was going to happen.
That already seems like a pretty light sentence. That's not enough. It's just not enough. We've got to do better. It's disheartening to hear that this happened to you. How do you feel knowing after Secretary Linda McMahon had just announced that the federal government, the Department of Education, the Trump administration is now going to step in because there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of cases just like yours happening right now in America where kids are being abused and groomed and sexualized by teachers, and it's getting swept under the rug. They're not even getting the bare minimum, which is what you got, the bare minimum. These teachers are just, they're being protected by teachers unions. They're hid away, passed on. How does that make you feel?
It's terrible. And it's terrible what's happened. It's long overdue in time for schools and school boards and administrations within the schools to be held accountable. And so I applaud Secretary McMahon for her efforts to start holding these schools accountable. My attorneys, John Manley, he says it very, very well that these teachers and the administrators within the schools pass the trash. There's no accountability.
Yeah, that's terrible. And maybe we're going to talk about Kayleigh's Law. Maybe if there were more consequences, this would happen less. But if there's just no consequences, slap on the wrist, then we're making our children just available prey. Predators, where would they rather? They're of course going to want to sign on to a job where they're surrounded by young kids. So yes. If you're a pedophile, if you are an abuser, that's where you're going to want to go, where you have access. And adults should be protecting kids. Our system should be protecting kids and survivors like yourself. And too often they're not.
Yes. And not only are these predators going into schools and having unlimited access to children, they also have adults that they know that will cover for them and will ensure that they're prioritized and not the children. And it has become a true crisis across our nation. Our children are not safe from predators in schools. And something I've said for a long time is it's not the severity that serves as a deterrent, it's the certainty. And unfortunately, the certainty in these situations is that these schools will go to bat, and the hill that they will die on is protecting the predator, not the children that they have sworn to protect.
It's just mind-blowing to me. But so you're a survivor, you're a mom now, you're a victim's right advocate, and you're the person that Kayleigh's Law is named after. And that law right now is on the books in Arizona, right here in my home state of Wisconsin. And just this month, there's a federal version that cleared the House Judiciary Committee with a unanimous vote. Not many things are bipartisan these days, very, very few, but this passed bipartisan 23-0. So Kayleigh, you're doing great work. This is not a political thing. Protecting victims of abuse, that is nonpartisan. Protecting children in schools, that's nonpartisan. So I applaud you. Thank you so much for continuing to fight when I think a lot of victims of abuse just don't have the strength and the courage to do so.
Thank you. It's not easy. And the way I look at it is, when we have knowledge, we have an obligation. And unfortunately, I've learned so many things and experienced so many flaws as a result of the system that have directly impacted me, that I'm still battling 20 years later. After I turned my abuser in and he was convicted, I'm still fighting him in court. I am still fighting the district 20 years later. And this is the reality.
Wow.
And so I owe it to every survivor and victim to fight for them, because no one should have to continue to endure these things that I'm trapped in. And you either quit or keep going. Either way, it's hard. And I choose the path that will ultimately help and impact and protect children and survivors.
I know you've talked about this a lot, and so I'm asking these questions because I know it's important for people to know your story and important for parents to hear it, because if you have young kids, like I have some young kids, and you just don't think it can happen to you. I think that's because you can't. It's almost too much as a parent to have. We worry enough. And you think you're sending them to school, you're sending them to practice, and these are trusted adults. They like to say that a lot these days, trusted
Position
adults.
of trust.
Yes. And the abuser, they're not going to be the creepy guy in a trench coat. You know, they're not going to be obvious like that. I wish that they could be, because then it would be easy to spot them. But abusers are often trusted people in a kid's lives. So let's go back to when you were 12 years old. What happened, and how did your parents finally find out what was happening to you?
So my mom actually worked at the school that I was sexually abused at. And so it's easy to think that your children are safe, but predators don't just groom victims. They target them and they groom the entire community, whether that be at a school or a church. They target people, and they're very intentional. And so when people think, oh, they're creepy, or the stigma of the scary guy in the van or the trench coat, no, most predators are charming narcissists, the ones that you would least expect. And they're working overtime to groom the community more so than they're working to groom their victim, so that if and when a victim comes forward, the community is more likely to stand with them, because they now believe that this person would never do those things, which is what I experienced. And I switched schools my 8th grade year in soccer teams. So he no longer had access to me. And I truly believe that's the only reason that the abuse stopped, was because he could not isolate me at school, and he could no longer lock me in the equipment closet and molest me till he was sexually pleased. And I was watching a video my freshman year, and it wasn't a term then, this was in 2006. It was about grooming. And I thought, oh my gosh, all these things have happened to me. And so I went and talked to the Mothers Guild. And that was the first time I ever said out loud what was done. And I didn't even disclose that much information. And she told me that she asked me if I knew what a mandated reporter was, but I was 14, so I didn't necessarily understand. She said, I have to call your parents. And I begged her not to, because I knew that no one would believe that he did those things to me. And that was actually what happened. It wasn't that people thought I was lying. It was just that he would never do those things. And that's exactly how he set it up to be.
That's wow. There's so much to unpack there. What you said, they groom a community, that really impacted me. And I think that's something that everyone listening should remember. They groom the community. They are often charming narcissists. They are very skilled at manipulation. And so you're right. Lots of times abusers, if there's a single mom, they'll groom the mom. They'll groom the family. No one wants to believe it then. Yeah. And with this coach, people don't want to believe it. They don't want to think that this can happen. I think that also parents should also hear what you're saying, that you didn't want parents to know. Why didn't you want your parents to know? Did you feel intimidated, shame? What are the things that kept you from telling your parents?
I knew that if I told them, our lives would never be the same. And that is exactly what happened. And as an adult looking back now, my parents did everything that they could have done with the information that they had, which we're now discovering they did not have all the information. And I also didn't have all the information. And they trusted the school, they trusted the prosecutor, they trusted the system. And as I said earlier, here we are 20 years later, and I'm still in and out of court. But I did not want my parents, I didn't want them to carry it. I didn't want them to think it was their fault. I didn't want to get in trouble, because when you're groomed and you're that young, 6th grade, I mean, go find a 6th grader. I was so little, and I've struggled. I have 2 kids that were in 6th and 7th grade this year, and my oldest is now a junior. I have 5 children, and I look at them and I think, I was so little. How could a 30-year-old be so just sexually aroused by a little girl? And then I look at my almost 17-year-old, and I was done with the entire process by the time I was her age. And so all the things that I went through, during that time, but I didn't want my parents to have to live the reality of what came after. And it was horrific. What happens to you is terrible, but no one can prepare you for the hell that comes after you turn your abuser in.
Wow. I want to hear more about that. And just to notice that this happened to you 6th grade, 7th grade, you finally escaped 8th grade, but you're dealing with it as an adult. These predators rob children of their childhood, their adolescence. They steal so much. They take so much. Sexual abuse. That hurt, that pain stays with the victim for the rest of their lives, and that's why it's so serious. It needs to be treated seriously by the law. Just because maybe you're not, I think there's this assumption like there wasn't an attempted murder, but they kind of murdered your soul.
Yes, the second they violated you, they killed a part of who you were.
Yeah, and that it's treated so lightly is insane. And especially when this is happening to children, the recidivism rate of abusers of children. I mean, I really think that it's off the charts.
I agree.
These are people that can never fully integrate into normal society, and they should not be allowed to. And that's your laws trying to make the first steps to stop that. But how did the community react? And I think everyone should remember this, you said 2006. I think there is more awareness now, but back then, how did your community react?
Almost everybody we knew turned their back on us. The soccer club, the weekend that I turned him in, we were down at a tournament in Tucson, and the entire team had white shirts on. Now, crickets and, you couldn't make shirts like you can back then. And they used permanent marker on white shirts that said, "We support our coach." And my parents asked if I wanted to leave, and I just wanted to play soccer. My dream when I was a little girl was to be the next Mia Hamm. I loved soccer. And I said, no, I just wanted to play. So my parents let me stay as long as I could. And then it just got to a point where it was no longer safe. But the teachers at the school wrote character references that they would leave all of their children with him. He would never do such a thing. I mean, they villainized me. They ostracized. I was 14 years old when I turned him in, and it was terrible. And, sadly, like most, they were all victims of him as well. Not abuse, but to who he really was. And so when he was sentenced in court, how he got caught was a one-party consent call, where he not only admitted to everything, he had an excuse and an out for everything that I had said that he did to me. And so all of those people were witness to that phone call where they heard firsthand. And a lot of them, from my understanding, walked out of the courtroom over 20 years ago and were completely blindsided by discovering that he had in fact done these things to me.
You weren't, I don't know the full story. You could not have been the only victim. There had to be other victims. Has anyone else come forward?
I'm the only known documented victim. That does not mean that there are not other victims.
I would bet that there are. And I think a lot of people just did not want to, they saw what was happening to you. And that's why people stay silent even to this day. I think the shame and the way that these teachers are protected, that's why a lot of kids don't come forward. It's so, they know their whole world is going to change. They don't want everyone to know.
Yeah.
They want to keep it, and they know once parents find out, this is going to be a big deal. So what conversations, real quick, what conversations do parents need to have with kids so that they can be sure that their children will come to them if something happens?
I think it starts when they're very young. What I mean by that is if your children don't feel like the little things matter to you, they're never going to come to you with the big things. And so always being intentional. Now it can be hard, especially after a long day as a parent. And what's so just juvenile to us as adults, and we know is so small in the grand scheme of life, to them at that time is a big deal. And so just really ensuring that you're present in those conversations and they feel like it matters and they're worthy of being listened to, and affirming them that you're listening. I think it starts at a very, very young age. And as they get older, never downplaying or minimizing when they tell you they're uncomfortable with something. That is their body responding. And it is critical that as a parent, we listen to that and we don't question them and we don't dilute the feeling that they have. Because if we do that and then something does happen and they're trying to tell us out of a gut instinct or a feeling, they're never going to come back. And so it really starts when they're younger. And when they tell you they're uncomfortable with someone per se, having that conversation, why, let's talk through it, and just helping them set up safeguards. And people have asked me, didn't your parents tell you if someone ever touched you or was inappropriate to tell them? Of course, my parents told me that. But when you're groomed and the perpetrator goes these extra lengths to ensure he knows where you live and befriends your parents and all of those things, it's not as easy as just tattletaling on an adult. It's a power control, and it is a control over a child. And so it's really important to have those conversations that are proactive and not reactive, starting when your children are very young.
And so again, what was his final sentencing when finally all of this came to light?
His conviction?
Yeah, his conviction.
So he was facing 25 years to life in prison, and he asked for a plea deal in lieu of extended prison time. So his conviction was, he pled guilty to 2 counts. He pled down, so from a class 2 felony to a class 3. He got 9 months in jail and then supposedly lifetime probation, which is a complete crock of not what it says it is.
9 months in jail is not even close. No. Oh my gosh, your parents must have been beside themselves. That
they were devastated, and they were told this is what the plea deal was, and we've discovered a lot since then, and found out a lot about the system and what was actually happening at the time of his sentencing. And my parents also were told that he would be on the registry. And so, I really worked hard to move on with my life. And then in 2020, I had to go back to court and face him, which is how I discovered that I didn't have actual protection. But we also discovered that he was not on the sex offender registry. We were very confused. And I also learned that it's different everywhere, but he was required to register as a sex offender, but because he was deemed a level 1, a low risk, he was not on the public registry. Now in Arizona, there's a 19-question general risk assessment that determines their risk level, which ultimately impacts their registration requirements. So a level 1 is not required to upload onto the DPS public registry in Arizona. every state is very specific, but I could not believe that. He was a teacher. How is he a low risk? He sexually violated a 12-year-old, which under Arizona law, it's 14 and under is a dangerous crime against a child, sentencing enhancement. How is he not on the public registry? So that neighborhood search that you do, he would not show up. And I couldn't understand. So I, again, very quickly got to work and actually spearheaded a law that would require all offenders who've been convicted under that sentencing enhancement 13705 that they must be uploaded onto the public registry. And it passed a couple of years ago. And so after 18 years, my abuser is finally on the DPS public registry where he always should have been.
Was he able to continue teaching, being around children? Did you ever find out?
He was not able to teach. I don't know that he lost his license because in most states it's up to the board. You don't automatically lose your teaching license when you're convicted of a sex crime, which is insane and also needs to change. So he did not go back to teaching. He did weasel his way into one of the largest mega churches in Arizona, who actually showed up to defend him in court in February. And he was they allowed him to be on the soccer field around girls. He violated his probation and attended a father-daughter dance with their prison ministry pastor. And he traveled to Hawaii with the soccer team. And so, he's a predator. He will go back to the environment that he knows how to manipulate and maneuver in. That's exactly what he did.
Yeah. That's because he's got a problem and he constantly wants to be around young girls.
Yes.
And I can't believe that there are adults that will facilitate that. So in 2020, you had a phone call, you find out what exactly?
I found out that he had completed all of the terms of his treatment, and that because he did that he was eligible to petition to have the terms of his so-called lifetime probation terminated. Now, it's really important to note that in Arizona, the probation and sex offender registry requirements are two separate things. So Arizona requires lifetime registration, but you are eligible to get off probation. And so he did petition, and I actually had to go back to court in 2020 and reface him.
And what does that mean if he isn't on probation?
So if he was to get off of his probation, he would not have to have any of the pre-required permission slips, which he recently talked about on the news, what an inconvenience it is in his life that parents have to sign permission slips for him to be around their children. He would not have to disclose unless there was like a background check. He could go to parks, he could go to schools, he could do all of those things. And most terrifying for myself is that he would be able to actually contact me at whatever capacity, whether it be show up at my house, social media. If we were both by chance at the same church, he would not be required to leave. I would obviously be the one to have to go. And so it would just take away all of his rules that he had to follow.
And that makes you completely vulnerable.
Yes.
And all over again, victimized all
Yes.
over again. I think a lot of people, they'd hit a wall, they'd feel powerless, but you wrote a law. So how did that start? This past February, you were back in that same courthouse, like you said, but something was different. Tell us what happened.
So this last February, I was actually able to serve my abuser as we were walking into court. And I'll come back to that in just one second. But I had discovered that my direct protection was tied only to the terms of his probation. And so in 2020, after I faced him, after court, I was bombarded. There is no such thing as post-probation protection. And I didn't understand what that meant. Well, then our world went to shambles and 8 months went by. I just could not believe that every third Friday in Arizona was sex offender release day. And these perpetrators were getting off their probation and victims were not even being notified. And so I went to the legislature in December of 2020 and talked to Senator Sina Kerr. And it was such a hard thing to wrap your head around. What do you mean you wouldn't have protection? And so we very quickly drafted SB 1412. And that was the original version of Kayleigh's law, which would give a victim natural life protection from their abuser. because in order to obtain a restraining order or some sort of injunction, you typically have to go back to court and prove that you are in harm or that this person is harassing you. What makes Kayleigh's law so unique is that it served at the time of sentencing, and it makes the crime that was committed adequate enough to continue to have that protection for the duration of your life. You don't have to keep going back and fighting for it. And so that's where Kayleigh's law stemmed from.
That's amazing. Do you think a lot of people they assumed, I think they just assumed that that your abuser can't contact you. They assumed that they're registered. They assume that the system is taking care of them, just like kids assume that the adults are safe and parents assume that kids are safe when they're in schools. Even victims assume that, okay, well, justice has been served and I'm protected. And turns out you aren't, or you weren't.
Yes.
Until
I do. I think that's a great way to frame it. I do think that a lot of victims assume that they have that protection, that it's in place forever, when it's actually not.
And they want to forget. They want to move on, like you said. They don't want to revisit this. It's a painful experience. Maybe now, like you, they have their own children, they have their own families, and they don't want to relive this. And maybe their kids don't even know what happened to them. Maybe sometimes even their spouse doesn't know. And they don't want their friends to look at them differently. They just want to move on. And I'm glad that you did this, but you can't, like, you have to find that strength to keep fighting. And I think that you're a good example for victims of abuse, that when you see something so unjust, if you had not said anything, think of all the people that would be affected. Because I want to go, first of all, we already have some stats, don't we? How has Kayleigh's law already benefited so many victims? How many lives have already been changed?
So in the first year, there was over 1,000 victims that were able to obtain a natural life injunction under Kayleigh's law in Arizona, which I just have full body chills. That it breaks my heart that many humans were violated to the point where they were able to obtain a natural life injunction. It's terrible. Arizona is retroactive. Some states are not. I don't have the actual number, but I do know that as of 2026, from the AG's office in Arizona, it's closer to over 4,000 victims that have been able to petition and under this protection in Arizona.
And Wisconsin was the second state in the country in 2023 to pass this legislation. I'm so grateful for that. That's amazing. How did you feel knowing that not only did this protect victims in Arizona, but how did that come to happen? How did this legislation reach Wisconsin?
So my family's from Wisconsin. My husband's from Wisconsin.
Oh, where's he from?
Go Pat, go Kenosha.
Oh, he's from Kenosha. I'm in a suburb of Milwaukee, so not too far.
We were just back there for the 4th of July, actually.
Okay.
And so my mom's family is in Green Bay, De Pere, Sheboygan. My husband's family is all from Kenosha. And so just through family, I was able to get connected to Representative Dietrich, and we got to work very quickly.
Oh, yeah. I know her well. She's amazing. Yes. Waukesha County. She is a assembly. For those who don't know, Barb Dietrich is a warrior. She's always fighting for kids. She was the OG, standing almost entirely alone, trying to pass bills to protect women's sports and women's private spaces before Riley Gaines, before it was popular. She was doing that hard work. So shout out to Assemblymember Barb Dietrich, who is always fighting for children and women and victims. So thank you, Barb, for that.
Yes.
I'm not surprised at all. Not surprised.
Yes, and it went through very quickly in Wisconsin. I mean, we drafted in July and it was signed the following April.
By a Democrat governor, Tony Evers.
Yes,
so,
yes.
bipartisan.
Kayleigh's law has had complete bipartisan support, and as it should, because sexual abuse knows no bounds. It has no bounds. It's rampant, and it affects every party, it affects every demographic. And so it's always had complete bipartisan support. And I'm very grateful for that, because giving victims protection from the person who's been convicted of sexually violating them it should not be a political issue.
So 2 states is not enough. You've said that, we saw the clip, 2 states is not enough. And so how now this is becoming federal legislation. So let's talk about that.
Yes. So recently, actually, Missouri signed natural life protection in a broader criminal justice bill. So I believe it was June 12th, Kayleigh's law was signed in Missouri. So now Missouri has this sort of natural life protection. In April, we filed the federal version of it's Kayleigh's Law Act of 2026, and it really mimics the Arizona version. Served at the time of sentencing, we were very specific with the crimes that are eligible to obtain this sort of protection order. And it's because it's federal crimes and reservation, it'll work on the reservation a little bit differently, but it's huge. And that we would need a whole other segment for. But the federal version will mostly impact victims of child sexual assault material or sex trafficking. We also included stalking. And so victims of stalking, federal stalking, will be eligible to obtain this. And it also, on the federal level, has had complete bipartisan support. And it is expected to go on the suspension calendar before the August recess and be on the floor in the House. And hopefully we can get it out with continued complete bipartisan support.
Who is sponsoring this legislation?
Congressman Hamadeh from Arizona.
Okay, great. And so what should people do? Should they contact their representatives and ask them to support this legislation?
That would be very helpful and amazing. We're almost through Congress, so maybe perhaps contacting your Senate members and asking them to support this over in the Senate would be very, very helpful. And I think the most important and helpful piece of Kayleigh's law is, to your point of, a lot of people just assume that they have protection from the person who has harmed them. So educating your friends, family, anybody that you have a conversation with, that's in fact not reality, and that this would give victims the permanent protection that they deserve from the very beginning. So regardless of what happens post conviction with the perpetrator, a victim will now have that protection. And should they choose not to fight back on post-conviction, changes, then they will have this protection, and they will not have to be re-victimized and re-traumatized by trying to justify the need for it.
And just because it's passing at the federal level, or that takes time, hopefully you also need to fight for it state by state. It's always that you need to have it in state statute and federal. You want to have both. So just because it's wonderful success, this passed through Congress, goes through Senate, first of all, this would take some time, but that's not enough. We want this on the books state by state. And
absolutely.
Wisconsin, signed by a Democrat governor, California is now looking at this law, then this is something that that you should contact your state representative, whether they are Democrat or Republican. I know we have a lot of conservative listeners. If you have Democrat representatives, this is a great olive branch issue that everyone can agree on, and you will find common ground. So make sure that you're contacting your state representatives and your Congress member and your senator, regardless of their political affiliation. This is a bipartisan bill.
Yes, and it will be more impactful on the state level because most sex crimes are state level, not federal. And there's a couple states that have a version of a permanent order of protection, but they're very sloppy, very circumstantial. You have to go back to court and have an additional hearing. That's not how it should be. A victim should not have to go back and continually justify the need for protection from their abuser. And so the states that do have maybe a version of permanent order of protection, it's really important to dive into that and look at what all that entails, whether it be an extra court hearing. And I mean, in Maryland, it has to be a crime. It doesn't matter what the code is, but they have to be sentenced to at least 5 years in prison. They have to serve at least 12 months before you're eligible to petition. And so they claim they have it, and some of those states need a lot of work. And so amending those states to give the gold standard of what Kayleigh's Law is, and then pursuing it just in all 50 states across America to ensure that victims have this permanent.
So considering what you've said, I noticed there's model legislation on the website for America First Policy Institute. And I'll make sure that I link this, where you have right here a piece protecting victims of sexual crimes under Kayleigh's Law. And there's downloadable PDF. Your whole story is here. And I think people can find recommendations and things that they can share with their legislators to make sure they get this right.
Yes, it outlines the recommended policy recommendations and what all should be captured in the bill, and down to ensuring that data is collected for how many victims are able to obtain this type of order of protection within the legislation to ensure that from the get-go that it's being pursued appropriately.
Yes, and all of this is available at the AFPI website, and I will make sure to link to it so that, and it's always great to have this kind of model legislation. They can look to Arizona, they can look to Wisconsin. There are ways to easily adapt this to fit state statutes of your state. But this way, I mean, you've written this, you've worked with America First Policy Institute. So you having been on the front lines of this battle for so long, you know the trapdoors, you know
Yes.
the areas that legislators can miss. No fault of their own. It's just there are lots of ways that predators and criminal defense attorneys can bypass justice. So we've talked about what parents who would like to, if they're listening right now and they would like to make sure that this legislation is passed in their state, go to the AFPI website. They can contact you. They can contact America First Policy Institute, and let's get this going. Contact your state assembly members, your state representatives, and your congressional representatives, your senators. But what do you want as a survivor? What do you want to say to other survivors that are listening now, maybe who are hearing this for the first time? What is the message that you want to share with them?
I just want them to know they're not alone, and you didn't choose to be a survivor. Someone chose to selfishly violate you, and you don't have to live in that identity, but it doesn't mean that it's not part of your story, and it's not your fault, and that you're not alone. And I want to give every survivor hope that they can be the spark that starts the whole blaze for change, and whatever that looks like, whatever their passion is. But we are getting louder, and we are making more of a difference now than we ever have. And so I am proud to go to battle with every survivor and fight for all of them, because they still matter.
Thank you so much for coming on, Kayleigh, and making us aware of this, of your story. I'm very sorry this happened to you, but I'm so proud of what you've been able to do with kind of the hell that you've gone through. You were born for such a time as this. You were able to take that pain and to turn it into something positive that will protect so many children and so many survivors. So thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again really soon.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and thank you for the support.
Thanks. That was an amazing interview. Boy, I really learned a lot. I wanted to add a little bit more details. So start Wisconsin and Kayleigh's Law, July 21st, 2021. It was introduced by State Senator Barb Dietrich, Republican from Oconomowoc, with Marathon County Representative Jerry Petrowski. He was the Senate author. And this was passed by the Wisconsin Assembly February 24th, 2022, and signed into law on the 23rd by Governor Evers, a Democrat. This is a bipartisan effort. A little bit of, because of the Wisconsin Constitution, it is not retroactive. It applies to crimes committed on or after January 1st, 2023. Violating the injunction is a Class 6 felony. It covers first, second, and third degree sexual assault and the individual at risk cases. Kayleigh has been working with close to a dozen more states to draft similar bills, and we could not be prouder of her. Thank you, Kayleigh. Thank you for all that you're doing. As far as Congress, the bill is H.R. 8481, Kayleigh's Law Act of 2026. It amends Title 18 to provide natural lifetime, no contact injunctions for victims of covered federal offenses, federal sex crimes, violent aggravated felonies, and dangerous crimes against children. On April 29th, 2026, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime and Federal Government Surveillance, titled Peace of Mind, Strengthening Victim Protections Under Kayleigh's Law. That hearing took place where Kayleigh Kozak was a witness. And thank goodness for her. I'm going to put a link to the House Judiciary Committee hearing so that everyone can watch it if they want to learn more about this important bill that is going to protect the victims of sexual abuse, continue those protections I didn't know that those victims didn't have. And I commend Kayleigh for working through such a tragic event and using it to create positive change and make a real difference in the world, in her state, in her community, and across the country. And as I said during the interview, if you would like to go deeper on this subject, my guest Kayleigh Kozak leads the Family First campaign at the America First Policy Institute. We love AFPI. And AFPI has published clear, plain language briefs on exactly how Kayleigh's Law works and why it matters. I'll drop the link in the description and I'll pin it in the comments. If you read one thing after this episode, read that. Her story is there, there's videos there, and I urge you to learn more about this legislation and make sure that if it is not, if there isn't this kind of legislation being taken up by your state, make sure that they do. Again, this is a great effort, a great way to reach across the aisle and do some good. For those of us who are parents, this really matters. Those of us who are fighting grooming in schools, this matters. For those of us who are trying to make sure that teachers and staff members who abuse kids in classrooms, in the schools, coaches, our kids deserve justice and there needs to be accountability. A 9-month sentence was ridiculous. That was already ridiculous. And then to add insult to injury, the possibility that if Kayleigh had not fought back, that her abuser, this groomer, this manipulator and deceiver, that he was going to be completely free to harm again and to potentially come after the young woman that kind of made sure that some justice was achieved. So again, if you would like to learn more about this legislation, you're going to need to go to AFPI. That's www.americafirstpolicy.com. www.americafirstpolicy.com. And again, I'm going to drop all of those links for you. Specifically, there's also Kayleigh's bio and some issue briefs that would be very helpful for you and for a state legislator that is interested in drafting and sponsoring this really important legislation. This is a really serious subject, so I'm going to end this on a more serious note. Groomers embed in a community. Kayleigh said it. Groomers groom a community. They groom a school. They groom parents. They groom fellow staff members. They coach, they teach, they volunteer. They become the person that no one suspects. They're charming. They're well-liked. They can be pillars of society. So parents, you got to watch out. They manipulate children. They manipulate the adults around them. Kids stay silent out of fear, out of shame, confusion, and loyalty. Again, these are kids that have been manipulated and brainwashed and groomed. They don't know who to trust anymore. What parents can do, keep the lines of communication genuinely open. That was Kayleigh's number one advice, and that's mine as well. Kids disclose to adults with whom they feel safe. Parents, you are the trusted adult. You are the safe space. We don't follow those woke dictates, but parents, you are the trusted adult. Grandparents, you be there. You be the trusted adult. I don't even like to use that term. You be the family that every child needs. And be available. Find ways to strike up conversation and make sure you know what's going on in your child's school and in their life. Teach kids that there is no secret too big, no secret that they can't tell you. Really drive that home, because as we learned just a few days ago talking with Ryan Walters and with Corey DeAngelis, these teachers unions, they are working hard. They're working overtime to try to convince teachers to keep secrets with kids from parents. It's ridiculous. So make sure that they know that they can talk to you and they'll never get in trouble. Know the warning signs. Take changes seriously. And when a child expresses discomfort about an adult, don't write it off. Take it seriously. Even if it's someone that you think, oh, wow, never. Because that's what everyone thought about Kayleigh's coach. That guy, oh, he would never, pillar of the community. How to help kids who've been abused, get them to professionals that you can trust. Be very careful about counselors that you take your kids to see these days. Make sure that you're involving your faith community. Report to law enforcement and keep them connected to your family and to safe adults. How to strengthen the laws? Well, let's first of all, in your own state, work to get legislation passed that would protect children and adults that have been abused. Federally, HR 8481, push this to your state representatives, your congressmen and your senators, Democrat or Republican. This is bipartisan. The Arizona model is ARS 13-1719. Again, that's some things I'll put in the comment. Kayleigh Kozak is AFPI's Family First campaign director, and she's a senior manager on its child exploitation initiative. So if you would like to reach out to her, please go to the AFPI website and she would be happy to help you. The America First Policy Institute would be happy to help you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Kayleigh and America First Policy Institute, for the work that you're doing. This is something that I was completely unaware of until just last week. And so thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for letting me know about this. And I am proud to stand with you. I'm proud to promote this to every parent activist, to every parent out there, to every grandparent. Don't think it can't happen to you. And don't think that it can't happen in your community. And make sure that these sexual predators aren't given a slap on the wrist anymore. We've got to fight for our kids. So thank you very much. Have a good day.